Perfect. And we're going to cover really two things today. And I think they're really pertinent to what you guys do. So just to dissect, this is what we've been through so far. Blah, 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 blah. Then on the second column, blah, 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 blah. We did some affinity diagrams, some Pareto analysis, but largely it's, you know, how to structure a Six Sigma project and history and stuff like that. Last week we got into the cost of poor quality, business case. Today I want to cover really two things. Real simple. One is risk management. And what I'd like you guys to think about today is using the tool, especially FMEA, way beyond just setting, you know, the risk involved with setting up a project, right? I think it's so pertinent to replacing things like MRB. You know, in other words, MRB is the horse is already out of the barn. We already had a problem. We got to go figure out what happened. We got to trace the trail. Is the trail hot or cold? Versus anticipating, identifying, managing risk. You know, so we're going to talk about how risk management and FMEA is used, maybe used in terms of a, you know, looking at risk that's involved in projects. But I'd like you to kind of take it to the next level and think about your own processes. Because we have a lot of guys have a lot of experience, right? You have a lot of knowledge you can grab clues from. So what if there was MRB was something that you didn't really have to do very often because you've already identified and mitigated risk that you've seen before. All right, so that's how I'd like to. I'm excited about that part of the presentation. I'm going to take you through how to do FMEA, and then we're going to get into some lean, and then we're done with define. Woo-hoo! All right, here we go. So project risk management. Again, when I say project risk management, think risk management, period, in terms of whatever process you guys do, whatever process you do, and the things that go wrong. So some basic risk, it's a future event that can impact the task or project if it occurs, right? Risk management is basically foreseeing potential risk that can inhibit the project deliverables from being delivered on time, within budget, and even think orders. Think, again, whatever job you do at the company, what are some of the things that are risky? Like, what are the things I have to redo? What are the defects? Like every tool that we're going to talk about, whether it's Fishbone, whether it's affinity, whether it's problem solving, whether it's 5Y, I'd like you to always, your initial reaction should be, I need to get 3 or 4 people, right? We want to leverage, and this tool, particularly risk management, is about leveraging diversity, you know, and not doing it, sitting at your desk and doing risk management. None of these tools are meant to be done by yourself, kind of like A3, all right? And largely it's, the main purpose is to foresee potential risks. There's a whole bunch of different types of risks we get into. It's concerned with identifying, assessing, and monitoring risk before they develop. I'm taking out the word project because none of us, we don't do a ton of these long 8-month, even though you're gonna have green belts, and if someone asks you to, you can do it, but I'd like you to just think about risk again. So here's the steps. The project risk analysis consists of these steps. And again, I'm gonna take out project. Risk identification, risk assessment, and can we kind of quantify that? You know, like put some numbers to it somehow so we can kind of look at like degrees of risk. And response planning. So if I can identify it and assess it, then we can maybe, all right, what are we gonna do in case? Like, what are we gonna do if this pops up? And we can have a response plan, and we can mitigate it, and we can track and report it and close the risk so it doesn't, there's no possible way it'll happen. And the categories are human and physical resources, technology, suppliers, customers, security, and legal. It consists of evaluating the range of possible impacts. And when you follow these steps, define the various impacts of each risk. I'm going to have an example of one. I'll show you. Rate each impact based on logical severity. Like, in other words, if it happens, is it going to shut us down? Is it going to, the place is going to catch fire? Are we going to lose customers? We want to rate the impact. We want to evaluate risk by that severity level. Like, in other words, we want to go after the risks that have the highest impact level first. and when we get into FMEA, it's just such a neat, I know so many lean people that think that that's their favorite tool, FMEA. So I'm really excited to present it to you. I don't know, has anybody, if you could just tell me, have you guys done FMEA? Anybody?
I haven't done it personally, Bill, but I know we have other team members here that have done it. So.
Okay.
I've done them a bunch. I was on mute
Okay, Jim.
for the button. Oh yeah.
All right. There'll be a review for some, but I feel like the biggest component is a group of people doing together, thinking together. It doesn't work really well solo.
Really not.
Yep. Determine if any controls exist and define potential mitigation actions. And that's where the A3 process, I got Ulbrich and PTA here, so I could talk about A3 a little bit. That's where they go, right? The mitigation actions. Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to mitigate the risk? It involves planning and implementing the steps to reduce or eliminate the probability, and the risk owners plan and implement mitigation actions. Again, think A3. It's a great A3 process. In other words, we identify a risk in MRB or in production planning, and bing, it goes up. What's the thing that every time we run it, we have a problem? Never goes smoothly. The project core team members are responsible for identifying an appropriate action owner. And again, just think A3 leader. And so that's why I love my A3 process. For me, when I have my own business, it's like it goes right from MRB right onto the A3 board. The risk owner must track all mitigation actions and expected completion dates. And a risk that has occurred is an issue. A contingency plan is a way to address it. And risk and tracking and reporting provides critical visibility to all risk. Risk owners report on status. Depending on severity, project managers need to report the status of each category of risk to senior management. Again, you guys aren't like that. There's not a whole heck of a lot of levels of hierarchy that you have to report to. The details of each risk and issue should be recorded in a risk register, and I'll show you what that looks like, or other tracking device. People in aerospace, for those of you guys that have been in aerospace, they all have a risk register, and you kind of keep track of them over time and see which ones you've mitigated, see if we've improved the scores on them, that kind of thing. And risk closure, the risk owners are responsible for recommending the risk closure. Again, A3 makes this so simple. A risk is closed when the item is not considered a risk anymore. When we go ahead and do the FMEA again, that one doesn't come up. Now we don't have to think about that anymore. And when it's closed, the project manager needs to update the risk status in the risk register. So here we go. Another fine tool. We did affinity diagrams, now today FMEA. But there's no homework on this one. I couldn't think of anything good to give you for homework. So the FMEA is an analysis technique to identify, evaluate, prioritize a potential deficiency in a process so the project team can design action plans to reduce the probability or possibility of that happening. It's like, in other words, I know that every time we make this product, we end up with a complaint, or we end up with defects, or we end up having to run it again, or we end up having to, and those are the types of things that this is a great tool for. It's it's a cool cross-functional barnstorming session. Again, it doesn't have to take a lot of time once you get good at it, but it's important that, the A3 team size, 3 to 5 people, is perfect for doing FMEA. If you go past 5 people, when you're doing brainstorming, it usually gets unwielding. We start talking about the price of tea somewhere, or the 3 to 5 seems to be the right number, which coincidentally is what Taichi Ohno and Toyota, they have for their teams, and what we use for A3. It's a structured approach to predict failure. And we're getting, aren't we really good? And talk about the cost of poor quality at reacting to failure. When I say failure, I'm just talking about defects or problems, things that have to get put aside and addressed. We spend a ton of money doing it. We have meetings. Some people have meetings every day, an hour long. What's that?
It's painful.
Yeah, it's painful, and you and the trail is cold, it's like, you got to reconstruct what happened. You got to figure out who the operator was. You got to figure out who, what the what alloy it was. The trail's cold, and it's just such a waste spinning your wheels. Can we get really good at identifying risk ahead of time and make MRB something that takes 10 minutes in a huddle? Because we don't have that many of them, because we've mitigated most of the things that we're talking about. Because if you think about it, it's always usually the same root causes over and over. The problem is it's hard to get to root cause when the trail's cold. This tool is about getting ahead of that, so things don't end up in MRB. And I'm working really closely with Jay Trevor at, he's a COO at Albrecht Steel, and Brendan and everybody else, and just getting this mindset where, and Stephen Freeze too at the mill, of let's get ahead of it. Let's get really, really good at risk management. And then we don't have to spend so much time spinning wheels after the fact. So the cool thing about FMEA is you actually put numbers to three things. One, severity. If it happened, what's the cost, right? We got to pay for returns. We got to pay for warranty. We have to rework things. We got to, whatever. Second, how likely is it to occur? In other words, the last 10 orders for this particular alloy or this particular part number, we struggle a little bit. We had to come in on the weekends. That information these are all clues. So what's the likely severity, occurrence, and how easy is it to detect? That's the third thing. Those are the three things we're going to put numbers to. And then we evaluate the current control plan for preventing these failures from occurring and escaping to the customer, right? And in other words, if I have, my company, we ship 60 orders a day, out of the 60, they can't all 60 be risky, right? In other words, most of them we can do with our eyes closed. We can do it in our sleep. Can we identify those 3 or 4 that we got to keep an extra eye on? We need to go check. We need to make, be a little more careful with and pay attention to them. And then we prioritize the actions to improve. And there's a bunch of different types of FMEA. So, we're all familiar with, I'm most familiar, obviously, with, from a manufacturing standpoint, with failure mode analysis, just regular old, but there's design, in terms of, can we find out early? And this is kind of when we're talking about project management, is what are all the design possible flaws or risks that can happen when I'm developing new products, developing new systems. Equipment, process, I think, is what we're talking about pretty much, and then system FMEA, performed on a product or service product at the early concept design. We're going to focus on process at, I think, PFMEA. And this is what the template looks like, right? It's an Excel spreadsheet very often. It's on the big screen, during the during a session. And these are the series of columns. And I think hopefully by the end of my teaching today, you'll have a pretty good handle on how to fill this out. And I just wanted to throw an example out there right away, in terms of just so you get a sense of how the thinking works. This one is about banking. All right, I just picked one randomly off Google, off the World Wide Web, of web crawler. The first question is, I think the gray tells you what each column is. What's the step? So in this case, ATM pin that, yeah, ATM pin, whatever. And then in what ways can the step go wrong? That's what we're thinking about. We could have unauthorized access to the ATM. We could have an authentication, that word again, failure. And then what is the impact on the customer if this is not prevented or corrected? Unauthorized cash withdrawal, very dissatisfied customer, very annoyed customer. How severe is the effect on the customer? And that's where the rating comes in. Some people do 1 to 5, some people do, 1 to 10. Right? But again, you go around the room and basically say, all right, how severe is the impact on the customer? And someone may say, oh, that's a 7. And they're just gonna, from their gut, but because you have 3 to 5 people, you gain agreement on what that rating is, the severity rating. And then what causes a step to go wrong? How could the failure mode occur? Well, if someone can steal someone's credit ATM card, I could have a network failure. And how frequently is that? Like, what's the likelihood of that happening? And again, you go around the room. What are the existing controls? In other words, this is where we talk about how easy it is to detect. Like, what do we have in place now? One is block the ATM card after 3 failed attempts. Install load balancer to distribute workload across network links, so we don't have a network failure. You see where whatever goes in potential, now we're addressing the current process, ways to mitigate that. And again, now we're going to go ahead and, how easy is it to detect the failure? And same thing, 1 to 10, guys. What do you think? Oh, this is a 5. This is a 3. All right, and we can do, like, you could practice FMEA with being on time for work. That's a really good one when you want to teach it to people in your, in your organization. Like, what are all the risks for me being late, to work? And there's a whole bunch of things that happen. Right, my alarm clock didn't go off, to I hit 10 lights on the way in, to I got a flat tire. And you can go through that thinking of what's the likelihood that we're going to have how severe is the effect of a flat tire? Well, it's going to cost me an hour or two by the time I get AAA, or I change it myself. Like, you get the point. Like, you can practice, with real life scenarios with this thinking. But the beautiful part is you add up all the, all of the indexes, and then you come up with a total, and it allows you to prioritize which ones are the most important to go after, second most, third most, and the action recommended would be, put on the A3 board, because then you got a cross-functional, diverse team, temporary self-directed work team working on the risk. All right, so again, this is going to go really quickly. So I showed you an example. Hopefully, I think you got it, but I'm going to take you through the slides that I have to show you to get certified. Step one, list each product or process step that would be considered. And again, think about not being late to work. The process is driving to work every day. Step two, potential failure modes that might occur in each function. 3, failure effects that might affect the process. What ways can it go wrong? What are the likely effects of each failure? Potential causes of failure. Any control procedures that we have. So we're going through, the big headings, not the ratings right now. What controls are in place to mitigate it? I just had my tires checked, or I just brought new tires, or whatever that is. I just had my alarm clock serviced. I don't know. Now we go into the severity ratings. And again, I think I explained it to you, and it doesn't, I've seen people do 0 to 5. I've seen people do 0 to 10. Doesn't really matter. There's no science to this. I think the way you fail at this is sitting down at your desk and doing it by yourself, right? And not leveraging everybody that's in the meeting, right? In other words, the boss is the only one talking, or people are just, they want to say something, but they don't think they can, or whatever. That's the risk. If you get everybody thinking, this is a really fun tool. I think I'm not going to go through this. This is a severity rating again, and how ranking 10 through 1. These are some suggested one. We'll start with, maybe I'll just do 2. Hazardous without warning, may endanger operator. Failure mode affects safe vehicle operation, involves non-compliance with government. Failure would occur without warning. That would be a severe effect of a risk. And all the way down is no effect, or very minor disruption. Less than 100% of the product may have to be reworked. And you kind of just, there's no science to it. You don't have to spend a lot of time saying, I think it's a 4, oh no, it's a 6. It's kind of, once everybody understands kind of the top to bottom here, where 10 is severe and 0 is not going to happen. And then we get into occurrence rating, like how often, what's the likelihood it's going to happen? It happens all the time. Well, how often? And then there's very high, 1 and 2. Half the time, the last 10 orders we sent, 5 of them we had to rework. The last 1,000 orders we sent, 2 of them we had to rework. That's the kind of the thinking there. And again, you're going to give it a number, 10 to 1 or 5 to 1 is fine too. And then detection, how easy is it to catch? The last thing we want to do is have our customers be our inspectors. They don't get paid for it. They don't want to be unpaid. They don't like it usually. So how easy is it for us to catch it? If it did happen, and depending on severity scale. So all those are the 3 main things that we're going to kind of add together to come up with a rating for risk. And here's a detection rating. It's almost impossible to catch, all the way to we catch 99.5% of them. Right. And then you calculate the risk prioritization number. So all we do is go 10 times 10 times 10. Right. So there's not a lot of science involved. You have to pull out the calculator. And now you have an RPN for every single one of those risks. You say, all right, which one? And I think, in Oxford, early on in our A3 process, this was one of the things that I wanted to introduce to production scheduling. So in other words, what are the things that are coming down the pike over the next week or 2 that we just need to have the supervisor check in on every hour or every 2 hours, or have quality go out on the floor, or some different, something different. Don't treat everything like it's a huge risk. Don't treat everything like it's a no-brainer, right? What are the handful of things that we need to keep an eye on? And then we just rank them and we attack the big ones first. And the recommended actions, again, I'm spoiled, but put them on the A3 board. You know what I mean? So 1 or 2 people don't have to do everything, especially when you get to the point like Albrecht is and where PTA is getting, where people are very willing to go and say, yeah, I'll take that on, put it on my board. And assign owners. Yep, A3 takes care of that too. Take action, A3 takes care of that too. Update scores. You come back and say, hey, periodically, especially if you have an MRB meeting, you want to know how did it work, right? So now MRB becomes developing our ability to manage risk versus our ability to figure out what happened. Okay. And I'm gonna skip template. All right, lean. Woohoo! Now we're getting into the fun part. It's all fun, but this is really fun. I'm gonna go fly through this because I covered a lot of it last time. This is gonna be the shortest class of the whole session, I think. So a lean enterprise intends to eliminate waste and allow only value to be pulled through its system. To me, a lean enterprise is a company that uses lean as a business strategy. Lean is a business strategy. It's not a hobby. It's basically a way to businesses, whether my wife's frozen yogurt shop, a lemonade stand, or Albrecht Steel, PTA, we have no choice but to grow, none. You cannot tread water. I wish we could. I wish I could have stayed at $12 million and 40 employees. Things were manageable, things were fun. But if you're not growing in business, you're dying. So lean is a growth strategy where if we double in sales, we are not going to double the number of people we have, right? Because we're going to take all the waste out and we're going to allow people to do much more fulfilling, fun work. And again, I think I mentioned it to you. In my company, we went from 20 million in sales with 70 employees to 32 million over 3.5 years with the same 70 people. That's a lean strategy. It's growing and not just throwing bodies at it, not throwing bodies at demand and not throwing bodies at problems. It's characterized by driving value, establishing flow and pull systems. Those are kind of the mechanics of it. And flow is really if you're in an elevator and someone says, hey, what's lean? Well, flow is an order comes in the building and it never stops moving and then it ships. And sometimes it moves very, very slowly and sometimes it moves fast, but it never stops. And the things that make it stop are 8 things: defects, overproduction, waiting, non-essential processing, unnecessary transport, inventory, motion, and unused employee brain power. Those are the 8 wastes. And if you think about it, if my order is flowing, if it comes across the first one, a defect, what has to happen to the order? It stops. So we broke flow. So all those wastes are things that, one, we call them non-value added work. It's work that you do that your customer has no interest at all in paying for. It comes out of your end. It comes out of your profit. It comes out of your ability to pay people more money, that whole thing. Let's see, it creates production availability and flexibility. And the goal is always, getting everybody in the organization where they recognize waste and they have a way to eliminate it. They have to feel very free. At Albrecht Steel, if you go into that mill, I could take you right over to Ray Pelletier. And if he has to wait 5 minutes for something, he wants to put on the A3 board. If he has to walk 10 steps extra, he wants to put on the A3 board. Like you create a whole population of people that can see it, because we work waist deep and waste every day, all of us. All right. So it's the ability to see it. And there's a bunch of tools that we're going to go through, and we're going to do some, I think a mapping is in a future, I think it's one of the future sessions, but it allows us to see that waste because a lot of it is invisible to us. All right. It's about waste elimination. And the 5 principles are taken from Lean Thinking, the book Lean Thinking. This is a book that I bought 80 copies of handed it out to all of my employees, and we went through it chapter by chapter. This was actually the first book we read. Specify value desired by the customer. They're only paying you for what they're paying you for, right? They're not paying for anything else. So identifying that and understanding it. And we got into that a little bit, when we talked about voice of the customer a couple weeks back. And then it's identifying those value streams that provide that value. All right, right now in the case of, like right now, we're hyper focused on that Cat 1 right now, the IDEX Cat 1 assembly. But that's really, if you think about it, from the time they place the order to the time your customer gets it, that's a value stream. It's all those activities, and it also includes quality. It includes how it gets entered into the system, how it gets managed onto the schedule, the whole 9 yards. And we want to look at every one of those processes on the value stream and try to make them flow. And that the only way we make them flow is to see those 8 ways, and then have a lot of people that are able to see it and then have the power to take the waste out. And pull systems is really about, if you think about overproduction is the worst of the 8 wastes. It causes all the other ones, by overproducing. And all overproducing in my head is, listen, I'm not going to give you anything to do before you're ready for it. Like, in other words, I don't want to see big queues of inventory in front of people. All right, that's pushing. Pulling means just in time, they get it when they need it. Overproduction causes defects because sometimes we make a lot of stuff, we put it away, and we don't find out there's a defect for a month, 2 months. Also, it can get damaged when you move it to inventory. It can become obsolete when you move it to inventory. There's a whole nother set of waste that your customer doesn't care about if I have a lot of inventory, right? I have to do cycle counts. I have to make sure it's accurate. If I don't have a lot of inventory, then it's really easy to manage. It's really easy to manage inventory. And our customer doesn't pay for any of that. They don't care. They don't care if you count it every day or if you count it twice a day. All right. It causes unnecessary I'm talking again about overproduction, unnecessary transport because I got to move it somewhere, motion because I have to have someone do that. All of the 8 wastes are tied up in, and pull is a way to make sure that we're not overproducing. And then we keep doing it. And here's the hard part about lean, guys, and it's a fact of life, and it stinks. It never ends. Like, in other words, once we get it right, it doesn't stop. It's never ending. In other words, you can just keep going like this, and like this. And I think that's what we're going to see with that Cat 1 assembly. Let's see. Any questions so far? This is the fun part, obviously. This is like, I feel like I'm preaching at church. All right. I'm going to skip through this part. I think I covered it. Fraction. All right. And the history we got into, this was a while ago. I think I talked to you about Toyota. They were loom, the best loom manufacturers in the world. And then they talked about the fact Taichi Ono, right after World War II, having to rebuild the country. And Toyota was a little truck company. The guy who ran the grandfather who ran the loom company, Toyota Loom Works, he wanted to pass something along to his son, but he wanted him to do something different so he could make his own name in the world. And that's why he chose, I'll do cars or trucks, right? So he did trucks. And then, I think what really caught our attention was during the 70s when we were driving these big apartments around that used to break all the time. The muffler, the catalytic converter, the tires would blow spontaneously. They overheat, they'd be smoke pulling. You go down the highway, you couldn't go a mile without somebody being on the side of the road. And then these little cars came in and you're like, wait a minute, they don't break. My father, I have 4 brothers. He bought one of those about as big as my desk. Never broke though, but never. So then Toyota used to invite everybody over and say, hey, because we want to know, how are you doing this? Why don't they break? They don't break. Before you bought a Buick, good luck. 3 years later, you're buying another Buick or a Pontiac or you name it. That's what they wanted you to do, right? Because they only lasted 3 to 5 years and they get a new motor, a new transmission. Now these things weren't breaking, and they invited everybody over there and they said, here, this is how we're doing it. And they showed them the Toyota production system. which is really Toyota management system. It's how we manage people. And basically it's about respect for people. The people that are doing the work are the ones that are most qualified. One, they're process experts if they do it every day. Two, they're the most qualified to make improvements. And unfortunately, when all the big three went back to the States, they decided it wasn't the Toyota production system. It's called lean. So they took all the tools without the philosophy. That's the difference between TPS and lean. The tools are a small part of what Toyota does. They're a very important part, as you see, like especially the people that have made the planes. I think the Lego planes. The tools are very important. They're very powerful. However, the biggest struggle is as managers, because I had to learn the hard way. I had to understand that I'm not the smartest attacking the box. I have to engage everyone. The people that are actually doing the work know the work. They're the ones that can tell us where the problem is. Anyway, that's the history. And I'm going to skip that because we already nailed it. 8 deadly wastes. I'm going to skip that too. There they are, though. Just remember downtime, guys. Please, if you're into tattoos, this is a great tattoo. So you could always look at it on your arm or whatever. Put it on your bathroom mirror. But it's getting these 8 ways in your head when you're watching processes. Oh, that's over processing. Oh, that's a good example of waiting, and go after it. And you keep taking that cycle time and going from here, and it just keeps going like this. And the leap of faith, guys, that I think as lean thinkers, you always have to assume that the closer we get to flow, the less defects we're going to have. So the highest quality, the highest profitability for sure. And the way we measure our leanness is largely productivity, sales per labor hour. We're doing twice as much work with the same amount of effort without anybody working hard. All right, no one's rushing, no one's running. A matter of fact, Jim's on the call. He just went through the, I think with 60 or 70 people in Oxford with those planes. That 4th shift is closer to flow than the 1st shift. The 1st shift, we had people ready to quit. They're not fun. There's a sense of agita. There's a sense that I'm behind. By the time you get to that 4th shift and everything's flowing, that's called a JIT condition. And you're like, I can sleep. I can almost doze off, listen to music, sing when I'm working. All right. Those are the 8 wastes. Another word for waste is muda. And defects and defectives is waste. Obviously, that's just one of them. I'm not going to go through these. I think maybe I'll touch over processing. Unless you want me to stop, slow down, I will. But we kind of just covered them. Overproduction. That's the king of all waste. The queen. Waiting. People wait. Documents wait. Phone calls wait. Inventory waits. It's like the motor vehicle department all over the place. This is the one I think that a little bit of interpretation. It's anytime more work's done than required. It's probably over inspection is an example. Sign-offs is an example. Days only. Some companies, Trevor's on the call. I think they used to do a lot of this at Ulbrich, where certain jobs are so difficult that we can only do it on days. Or in the case of nuclear alloys, they have to have someone watch the thing from start to finish. If you think about it, it's a form of over-processing. All right. Transportation, self-explanatory. Transportation and motion. Transport's moving things. Motion is people moving. Inventory we talked about. It's the sleeping money, right? In other words, the whole game is if I have a lemonade stand or I'm running Duraflex, it's the same concept. The faster I can get from the time I get the order to the time I ship it and the money's in my bank account, my cash flow is better. More cash flow kills more businesses, particularly in the first 1 to 5 years, than poor sales. When we got lean, we gave bonuses in 2008 after the crash. Our sales were down. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was somewhere around 30 or 35%. There's companies last year that were down 60%, especially aerospace, and they still made money because basically you're just down throttling. You don't have to lay anybody off. I still have the same number of people. I don't have to, you know what I mean? It's the same number we started with. If you've been doing it for a while, I think of lean as an insurance policy also, because most of the things that that impact our prosperity, our ability to earn money, we have no control over. We can't control what's going on, on Wall Street, in Congress, what our competitors are doing, the raw material shortages. So much of what we depend on, we can't control. So one thing we can control is our operational excellence. And that's what lean is really about. And it's about operational excellence as it pertains to every single person, the temp that started on third shift to the CEO and the COO. It's a mindset lean. And motion, pretty explanatory, underutilized employees, I beat that. And how do they go together? They're both, I always think, lean time management, right? In other words, I got this amount of time. How are we able to take waste out and be able to produce more with the same amount of time? Lean is time management. Six Sigma is about variation, right? In other words, do I get the same result every single time? I always think of Six Sigma as a tool in the lean toolbox, because I think hopefully, guys, a year from today or 2 years from today, and you have your green belt, on your wall. I think coffee cups too. I like that idea of coffee cups at the end too, like as an award. But anyway, there might be a few tools that you will use during improvement projects, during your A3 process. That's what I'm hoping for. It's a tool another tool that you can use. All right. When the current condition is a lot of data, or we're looking at a lot of variation in processes, that's when we pull out our Six Sigma green belt. And let's see, I'm gonna skip this. I'm gonna send you the slides today so you can end the recording. So if you want to review them slowly, you don't even have to leave, Mike, because I'm done almost. Define phase constraints, potential roadblocks. We don't have historical data. Team members don't have the time to collect the data. Busy is always going to be the constraint for any kind of continuous improvement. So that's what I love about the A3 process is we're cutting into busy. Everyone's busy. We're not the state of Connecticut, or Pratt and Whitney, where people are hanging around looking for something to do. We got orders to process. We got things. We're all busy. So it's that's a real constraint and I think the A3 process does it nicely. 15, 20 minutes a day, every person in the business. Can we work on our business versus just in it? And ta-da. All right. Done with that.
All right.
Not bad, 40 minutes. So that's the end of the define phase. I'll get you the slides and the recording for the folks. Nice to see your faces, by the way, people. I hope you enjoy it. Stick with me. I know it's not the most, this one was really fun. I like this one, but the rest of them were tough. So have a great weekend, people. Thank you again for showing up. And
Absolutely.
And that's it.
Hey, thanks,
Phil.
Bill.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Bill.
See you next
Have a
week.
great
Bill.
weekend.
Thanks again, Bill.
You're welcome.
All right.